Tonight, miracle on the Hudson. A jetliner filled with passengers crashes in the frigid waters off Manhattan, and everyone on board survives.
U.S. Airways Flight 1549 had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport in Queens for Charlotte, North Carolina, when it apparently hit a flock of birds, knocking out both of the plane's engines.
This is Cactus 1539, hit birds.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it. We're going to be nuts.
Even without power, though, the pilots managed to maneuver the Airbus A320 northward over the Bronx, make a sharp turn south, then follow the Hudson River alongside Manhattan Island, losing altitude along the way, and finally coming to rest on the river.
The plane then skimmed across the water 100 yards or more before coming to a rest just off Midtown Manhattan.
Many passengers didn't think they'd make it. One man turned his cell phone on so his body could be found through the phone's GPS. A woman left a message for her husband. Tell the kids I love them.
Joining me now is David Sanderson. He was one of the last passengers out of the plane. I understand you were actually in the plane after it landed for 7 minutes. Was it filling up with water?
Yeah, once we got everybody out, I stood in the plane to make sure everybody was out. And it was filling up pretty rapidly, and it got up to about waist level. And then when everybody was out in the lifeboats, I then stepped out on the edge there, and it was about knee deep at that point. And I just jumped in and started trying to swim to the first boat I could find.
Chesley B. Sullenberger III, a former fighter pilot, used 40 years of experience to somehow land the powerless plane on the icy waters of the Hudson River, a feat that's being called a miracle.
David, take me inside the plane. Take me inside as this plane impacts on the water. What was going on inside?
It was stone quiet in there, which was amazing to me because I don't think anybody cross-referenced what was going on. And I think that was a saving grace. And I just want to say, I admire your skills. I honor the way you managed your state. And now I do listen to the flight attendants every flight. Yes. I know exactly where everything is. Yes. I know exactly where the exits are. And I know where that life preserver is.
I'm really proud of a dear, dear friend of mine by the name of Dave Sanderson. Every one of us got a hero inside. Every one of us has a capacity in the most difficult times to find our strength. And it's nice to see a miracle on the Hudson and know that part of that miracle was an extraordinary pilot, and another part of that was a dear friend who, even when he could barely function, made sure other people's lives were being saved and supported.
By midlife, everybody here will be tested by a traumatic life event, which I call a personal plane crash. These midlife jolts can propel us or derail us, taking us back to square one. These jolts can create a lifetime of purpose, creating new relationships, new careers, new worldviews, and a clarity of your mission on earth. That jolt came to me on January 15th, 2009, when I became the last passenger off and survived the plane crash known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you this phenomenon called post-traumatic growth syndrome, PTGS, and how you can actually grow from a traumatic life event and how it's different when you stand back up after and your life is transformed. It was a little over 60 seconds after I took off when I heard the explosion, and it was a loud explosion. Man, I have never heard anything on a plane like that before, so it got my attention. So I looked up, and I looked out the window, and I saw fire coming out from beneath the left wing. So I knew something had happened, but I fly so often, a plane lost an engine. No big deal. So that's where I think God's grace entered for the first moment on this flight, because no one knew at that moment in time what happened on the left side of the plane also happened on the right side of the plane. And I truly believe I would have cross-referenced, checked in, what'd you see, what'd you hear? There could have been a lot of panic. People panic, people lose their heads, and when people start to lose their heads, they start making irrational decisions. But this day, 8 years later, the one thing that stays with me, and I bet if you talk to any passenger on that plane, they'll tell you the same thing. It was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. So that's why I think it's the moment I really believe that everything that I learned and everything that I trained for came into play. For the 10 years prior to that day, I was a head of security for a gentleman named Tony Robbins. No one had a chance to travel with him, but I learned and absorbed everything that he taught in addition to all the people that he hung with. So now I have the opportunity to go all over the world and share these lessons and strategies from that day. And my goal for you today is this, that you might hear one or two things that I'm going to share with you so the next time you face what I call your own personal plane crash, which might be a fire, a flood, a health scare, whatever that may be for you, you'll not only be able to survive it, but thrive and grow from it instead of going into a depressed state like so many people have. Because one thing I've learned in my life is those who have the humility to prepare will have the confidence to execute when that moment comes. And as the plane crashed into the river, I went back in my seat and up in my seat just like that. When I came back up, I looked up and I looked out the window and I saw light coming through the window. So I knew I had a shot, but I wasn't out. Because if you saw how the plane landed, the bottom of the plane was stripped off. And somebody actually did listen to the flight crew and went to that closest exit, which may be behind you, try to open that door. So all of a sudden, water started coming in. Now, my game plan was get to the aisle, get up, and get out. When I got to the aisle, something happened. Only changed that day for me, but probably changed the entire direction of my life. My mom kicked into my head. My mom passed away in 1997. There was something she would tell me when I was a child that popped into my head at that moment, and it was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And the right thing for me was, you take care of other people first. So I went towards the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help. And once we got everybody out, I started making my way out of the plane. Now, you got to remember, not only some of the top of the seats break back, but the bins are broken open. Luggage is flown out. You're waist deep in the water. So every time you took a step, you hit something. And at that point, you didn't know whether you were hitting a body, a piece of luggage, you didn't know what you were hitting. For all the further I could get up was 10F. And the first pictures released on Good Morning America was me trying to get out of the plane. But it was an amazing sight. There was no room on that wing for me. There was no room on that boat for me, but it was an amazing sight. People were already being rescued. And a few minutes later, I felt the plane shake. I thought it was going down, so I jumped in and swam to the closest boat that I could find. And when I got there, I heard him yelling, climb, climb, climb. I get up, can't. Then I heard my mom talk to me again. Because the word my mom hated most in life was the word can't. So I got one arm up, I felt somebody grab it. Got the other arm up, I felt somebody grab it. To this day, I do not know who these two gentlemen are. They pulled me on one of those ferries. And that's when my life started to change. Back when I first started in business, I did something then that I didn't know was smart or not, but I found out it was one of the smartest things I ever did. I found that mentor. That person with the 50 or 60 years of experience, and you can take their 50 or 60 years of experience and press it down from the decades of their experience down to your days of execution. And my first mentor's name was Bill. When I first met Bill, all I knew about Bill is he wore a flannel shirt and drove a pickup truck. But as I got to know Bill, I found out Bill owned 80 movie theaters in North and South Carolina. Bill was a multimillionaire. Bill was like the Sam Walton of Charlotte. And he took me under his wing. So one day I called Bill and I said, Bill, how does somebody become a business leader? And he gave me one of those bits of wisdom like only these guys can give you. And he said, if you want to be anything in your life, put yourself around the peer group you want to be like, and they will elevate your standard, and you will become what you want. So I'm like, okay, how can I fast track this thing? I'll go to a business seminar for business leaders. I paid $4,000 to go to this business seminar in San Diego, California. So I show up at the seminar, and I look at the agenda, and one of the things on the agenda was, we're going to do this thing called a mission statement. Now, candidly, I didn't know what a mission statement was, but I paid $4,000. I'm all in. So we get to that day. It was October 4th, 1994, and I write this. I, Dave Sanderson, see, hear, feel, and know the purpose of my life is to be happy, realizing I accomplish anything I desire and have faith in my Creator, inspiring others to be the same. Put it down, and the gentleman who was leading the seminar said, don't look at it for 6 to 9 months. You'll change it. Just immerse yourself in it. So I did exactly what he said. But 6 to 9 months later, I look at it, I'm like, I'm a loser. I'm not doing any of this, and I can't tell my wife. But all of a sudden, January 15th, 2009 comes, and that mission is realized. The Sunday after the plane crash, I went to my church. And that Sunday, everybody wanted to talk to me, but there was one guy who really wanted to talk to me. He's in charge of men's breakfast. And he came up to me and said, Dave, will you speak at men's breakfast next Sunday? I said, no problem, man. 50 old guys eating pancakes, I got it. I know they invited half of Charlotte. 500-600 people show up, and they run out of pancakes. They have hungry, angry Methodists. It's not a good combination for anybody. So I'm freaking out a little bit. So I go behind this curtain and said, God, give me something to say, man, and give it to me now. Deliver. And he gave me something to say. When I said it, I got done speaking, and a couple of men wanted to talk to me. I'm cool with that. But I look in the back of the room. I see this elderly lady. She's locking eyes with me. She starts making her way up this aisle. She interrupts the conversation. She grabs my arm really tight, looks me in the eye, and says something that only changed that day for me. It changed the entire direction of my life. She looked me in the eye and said, I was questioning if there is a God. And I don't believe in miracles. But you are physical evidence that there is a God, and he does miracles. She let my arm go, looked me in the eye, walked away, and that's the moment I realized what happened to me on January 15th, 2009 had now impacted somebody before she goes to her great beyond, wherever that may be. Believes there's a God who does miracles because I am physical evidence. And that was the moment that spurred me not to only go around and speak around the world, but see how I could help other people who've been through a traumatic experience like I have. See, I've had the honor and privilege of going to places like Fort Hood in Texas. I've been to Oklahoma after the tornadoes. I went to the eastern shore of North Carolina after Superstorm Sandy. And I get a chance to talk to people. And one thing I find out is this. People who've gone through a traumatic experience like that often go into a depressed state. But I didn't. People kept telling me that I was going to have depression. People kept telling me that I was going to need therapy. But I didn't. I kept saying, what's the difference between me and them? I started putting the pieces of the puzzle together and figuring out how I could help other people who've been through a traumatic life experience. So a couple years ago, AARP magazine called me and wanted to interview me. Now, candidly, I don't know why they want to interview me. I knew nothing about AARP, and I thought I was too young for it anyway. But it became very apparent very quickly why they wanted to talk to me. They wanted to talk to me about the strategies I used to grow from this traumatic life experience instead of going into a depressed state. See, they found out that I had helped the American Red Cross raise over $8 million over the last couple of years, and they wanted to understand the strategies I used and how I did it. So I agreed to do the interview. And they shared a term with me called PTGS, Post-Traumatic Growth Syndrome. And it's about how does somebody grow out of one of these experiences instead of going into a depressed state. Because one of the things I've realized in my life is depression is a state. Depression is a state just like joy or happiness or hope. Depression is a state, and any state can be changed. So you can be happy one moment and sad the next, and you can change it just like that by doing one of three things. The first way is through your physiology, the way you move your body. See, once the way you move your body, you get up, you change the endorphins and the way they react in your body, and all of a sudden you've changed your state. The second way is through your internal dialogue or the questions you ask yourself. And that's how I managed my state that day as the plane was crashing into the Hudson River. I asked myself different questions. And the third way is what you focus on. And that's how Captain Sullenberger managed his state as he was getting the plane in the Hudson River. See, most people focus on, why did this happen to me? They focus on disempowering things, so they say it so often in their brain, they dig themselves so deep, they can't get themselves out. See, the question I kept asking myself was, how can I add even more value and enjoy the process? And enjoying the process is probably the most important part of that. See, you can add value all day long, but if you're not enjoying the process, you're not growing. How many people do you know who go to work every day that hate their jobs? It's because they're not enjoying the process. They're not growing. So I learned that you can actually grow from a traumatic experience, just like you can go into a depressed state. The second thing I realized is something that Tony Robbins taught me and teaches all of his audiences around the world, that the meaning you attach to something produces the emotion of your life. And meaning equals emotion. Meaning equals emotion. Emotion equals life. You all should write this down or memorize this. This is the essence of the total power of meaning. Meaning produces the way you feel. Meaning informs your emotional state. You can build a ladder of positive and empowering meanings and effectively change the direction of your life. And it all starts by becoming conscious of the meanings you are constantly creating. This technique is called reframing. And it's the most powerful tool you can use to change the way you approach life. And that's what I call the halftime of your life. When you have to go back to square one to grow. Then you can create your own flight plan for your life. I work with an organization in Dallas called Halftime. It's about the second half of your life. And when your life has become so satiated, you're not growing. And what can you do to grow when all of a sudden you can't grow anymore? And all of a sudden you start learning and growing from your personal plane crash. And everybody in this room, listen to me, everybody in this room will have that personal plane crash. It's going to be that moment in your life when something is going to happen and you're going to be faced with that critical moment. And that's when change and growth happens. Things change, such as your relationships, where you start focusing on how I can add value to other people instead of your own personal significance. Your careers change, where you may be working for an organization or a company, and now you want to become an entrepreneur or work for a non-for-profit to add value in a different way. Then you start learning and growing through your worldview. And that's what dramatically changed for me after the plane crash. See, I was pretty focused on myself. I was pretty judgmental. But I kept thinking about to myself, it's like, I don't know people's backstories. And all of a sudden, my perspective started to change. Like, I don't understand people's backstories. I have no basis to judge anybody. And I kept saying that in my mind over and over. My worldview started to grow and expand. And that's what my midnight jolt did for me. See, midlife jolts can derail us, or they can propel us into reclaiming and remaking our lives, connecting and growing instead of becoming devastated and demoralized. Everybody in this room will have a personal plane crash. It's going to be up to you whether you choose to grow or you choose to wither. Change is inevitable. Progress is not. Progress leads to growth, and when you're growing is when you're happy. The events of January 15, 2009 were out of my control. But one thing I could control is the way I managed my state. And the way I managed my state then and the way I manage my state now is through my physiology, the questions I ask myself, and what I focus on. And if you can control that one thing in your life, and it's totally up to you on how you do it, you can choose to grow. And your life will expand. Your relationships, careers, all this will expand in your life. And all of a sudden you start living the purpose of your life. And your life will be transformed. Thank you very much.